is Arundhati and I'm part of Team Lyceumm. Welcome to Lyceumm's virtual event, Prepare a Conversation with Industry Experts. Today we have Mr. Leslie Issac with us as an expert. He is the Senior VP and Head of Retail Liabilities and Transaction Banking with Emirates NBD. He's responsible for the liabilities and transaction banking product management and portfolio for consumer banking segment of the Emirates NBD. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. We look forward to learning through this conversation with you.
Good morning, Arundhati. Good to be on this forum, and looking forward to the next few minutes.
Thank you. So to kick us off, I have my favorite question to ask my experts is, how have you come to do what you do?
Interesting. So I've been in Dubai since the last 20 years now. And when we started off, there was no idea that I would get into banking. And it's been since 2003 when I'm in the field of banking. And I guess my financial background, because I'm a chartered accountant by profession, you tend to get associated with industries that are more number centric, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And that's how banking just happened. And once it happened, it just stayed with you. And then you kept doing various roles in banking. So I've moved from finance to IT to outsourcing to retail banking. So right where I am right now, and in retail banking in products. So it's a little bit of having done a few things round, and then one leads to the other. So if you're looking for a planned answer of how you reached here, the answer is no. There was no planned way. You just made sure that you did your current job as good as you can, and a new opportunity comes up. So that's how I made it to where I am right now.
So what does your role as a senior VP for liabilities, retail liabilities and transaction banking entail?
So if I just take a step back and try to explain this for someone who's not very familiar with banks or with banking. So I'll just break it down. I mean, what is a bank, right? End of the day, a bank takes money from a few people in the form of deposits and then lends it out to a few people in the form of loans. And that essentially, that circular movement is the entire concept of banking. And within that, what happens and how you manage that money for customers, etc. So that taking money from people is in the form of deposits, of investments, of current accounts and things like that you see in normal day banking as a customer of a bank. So in that, there are two aspects of banking, which is the retail banking and the corporate banking. So corporate banking are where people like Lyceumm come into play, where you are an entity and an institution and you bank with the bank. That's corporate banking or wholesale banking. And then you have retail banking, which is consumer banking, which the person like Arundhati comes in to bank on your personal basis, right? So I am connected with that side of the business, the retail side of the business, where it's individual banking more than anything else. And in that, there are products, just like you have products, which is training, for example, corporate training is one of your products. So for a retail bank, liabilities or current accounts and deposits of customers is a product for us. And I am responsible for that product line for retail, right? And transaction banking is nothing but the day-to-day transactions that happen. So remittances, payments, receipts, and things like that. So responsible for anything that happens in that space from a product perspective and the liability products. I hope I've been able to explain.
Yeah, thank you. And, you've actually explained liabilities and transaction banking to us. For those of us who need that explanation, who lack in that information. So let's continue to look at what are your thoughts on how to reposition and calibrate operations for customer care in banking and operations and customer care actually.
So I won't
How would you
restrict.
suggest? Yeah, banks or
So so I won't restrict this to banks. Okay, so let
yeah,
me just take it not just in banks. So whatever I'm going to say now can be done by any industry which is engaged in connecting with individual customers. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
Yeah,
service industry.
and service industry. And if you take that as a perspective in today's world, if there's one lesson that's coming out loud and clear in today's world is how do I ensure the safety of my customer while interacting with me? There's one loud topic that comes out clear, right? So till now, as an organization, you were not responsible for customer safety when it comes to health, beyond making sure that when the customer visits my premises, I have the necessary fire equipment, for example, or I have the necessary, anything else, any other safety medical kit, for example, that I may have. Um, but now, and those are standard stuff, right? But now it's moved to a level where I need to make sure that the customer is safe from more than just that perspective. And there's a health related risk that can come at any time. I mean, we may get over this COVID now, and if it has taught us anything, it is how to be ready for the next COVID, whenever
Yeah,
that happens. Right? And that's bound to happen. So at some stage when that happens, how do we learn from this and move there? So that to me has become a single, a very important point in focusing on how do I make sure that every interaction with my customer, every engagement with my customer is done in a manner which is fundamentally safe to the customer. Second, if you keep that as a fulcrum, then try and minimize physical engagement with the customer as much as possible. And which means that every offering of yours, whether it is selling a product, whether it is servicing a product, or whether it is troubleshooting, every element of yours must give the customer a choice to either choose to visit you virtually and have a chat and you to be there, which means, and I'll come to that in a bit. Um, so either you visit virtually or I visit in person. And if I visit in person, what am I going to expect when I visit in person? I need to be able to see that before I actually visit you, right? So this implies that the customer need not just walk up to a place of work. You need to give the customer ample opportunity to actually see where this place of work is, or where do I come. For example, if it's a showroom, where is that showroom? How is it set up? If it's a office, where is that office? How is it set up? So that kind of a visibility is something which you'll have to make sure that you provide to the customer. That's from an interaction point of view. And from an operations perspective, you have to get rid of anything which you hand out. So earlier we were in the business of customer walks into a showroom and he gets a bill and you hand a piece of paper, and then you take cash from him or take a card from him, a physical card, and there's a lot of hand holding that happens, literally exchange that happens. How do I completely get rid of that? There is no physical engagement whatsoever. So if the customer wants to make a payment, he can do it through his mobile device with a secure card, or he gets a link on which he just presses and he gets his transaction done. If you need an invoice to be given, it is emailed in soft form and there's no need for a hard copy of the invoice. If the customer needs to be serviced with the service center and needs to contact your operations team, there is a link that goes, and once he clicks that link, knowing from, for example, if he's brought a product from you, that product has an invoice. If I point that invoice to an operations unit, I click that invoice, the operations team sitting wherever they are gets to know the complete details of that, and then a chat happens, right?
Yeah.
So uh, that kind of a zone is something which I believe people should start reaching out to. And one way of doing that is to list down all your touch points of customer engagement, all the various touch points that you have in a standard, in a day of a life of a customer, what all are the touch points, and see how I can virtualize all of those touch points.
So basically, you're talking about a lot of these mundane processes to actually be done by robotics process. Possible.
So robotics um, is a level 3 in my level hierarchy, if you put it, right? So what is a robotic process? A robotic process is nothing but, in a layman's world, a manual process that is done by robots.
Yeah.
The reason I'm explaining that is, if the manual process is a long drawn process, the robotic process will also be a long drawn process, except it's done by robots, right? So first I'll have to make sure that the process is as slick as possible. Yeah, and as short, as sweet, as secure as possible. That's the first thing. Once I do that, and I've become an expert in doing that, then I bring a robo and tell him, now this is the way to do it. Because the robo is not going to do it. They're only going to do it for you. They're not going to design it for you. Yeah. So you'll still have to design that process. So which is where you design the process and then let the robos take over. So robos for me are level 3. I mean, once you really mature, then you bring that in.
And what is your take on business continuity and planning through this situation? For anybody.
If there were entities today that looked at business continuity, and I don't want to keep saying business continuity, so I'll just call it BCP.
Yeah.
So if there's an entity that took to BCP as a theoretical exercise that needs to be done for one day of the year or half a day of the year, when you do a fire drill and you walk out, or you shut off your systems on a holiday and see what happens. This is reality, right? We were all thrust into a BCP mode without any warning. And yet, I guess that's the beauty of human beings, that you adapt. And everybody adapted pretty quickly. And in a matter of time, if there were companies that really didn't focus attention on BCP, within a month to 2 months, they got up and got geared to the challenge. So to that extent, I believe the more virtual you get, the more prepared you are for BCP. Whereas for a manufacturing organization, it's a very different ballgame.
Yeah.
Because in a manufacturing organization where you have physical plant and equipment, how do you ensure BCP?
Yeah.
Now, while there are some interesting thoughts on that, I hope that one of your experts on the program can bring in that aspect of how do you ensure BCP in a manufacturing world. But in the service industry, the virtual zone is the BCP side for us. And because you're in the virtual zone, you can have backup virtual zones as well. So if one fails, the other can kick in. Right. So to that extent, I think people are much better prepared now from a BCP mode. Not sure if that was a question.
Yeah. And I think you briefly touched on customer experience and customer interaction quotient. I mean, you have already, do you have any more?
Yeah, so on customer interaction, and I can only go by experiences, because in these days, the last 1.5 months has shown more innovations in customer engagement than we've seen in the last 10 years. Yeah. And that's out of sheer necessity, right? So the fact of necessity being the mother of invention is completely proven in today's times. So if I do a simple example where I want to do grocery shopping for like, and today, by the way, after this interview, I am going grocery shopping. So if I take that app as an example, and you go to a standard website of a grocer, say out here we have Spinneys as an example, or any of the other leading grocers that hypermarkets, so to call them, supermarket chains. If you go to the website, you'll find it's like super cluttered, right? And if I type in pasta, you will get 10,000 types of pasta that comes up, and you're not sure. And they come up with differing speeds. So by the time you click one, you realize that you clicked the wrong one because the page was still loading, and those kind of experiences. So you want to make sure that your web experience or the online experience through mobile is something which is short and simple on the screen. So, and I'm a big fan of Apple, so I'll always take the Apple example, where you only see what you need to see on the screen. Yeah. So you're not cluttered, whichever device, whether it's a laptop phase or a mobile device phase, whatever device, you make sure that the interaction is so focused that it's only that information. Everything else is just white space. So it makes that interaction easier, simpler. And should I now choose that I wanted to buy a specific type of pasta, I just have to key in the first 3 letters of what I want to buy, and only that pops up. So I am not confused by the 10,000 options that I see on that page, right? Yeah. So if your interaction can move to that level, if interaction can come down, it's actually getting down to the details. If it can come down to that level, that will make more and more people come to your site. Yeah. And interaction gets easy. And last but not the least, in a virtual world, if there's anything that people suspect, is trust.
Trust, yeah. Security.
Is how, and not just security of insecurity of the connection, but security as in how trustworthy are they when they come to delivery. Yeah, of the product, and tomorrow if something goes wrong, how sure am I that you're going to be available? Yeah. So to that extent, I believe that if there are those n number of things that you can do and prove on your engagement platform, if you can do that, that will ensure that people rely on you. Yeah. And you should always allow for instant feedback to be given. Instant feedback. Yeah.
So basically, that is managing customer sensitivity then.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That is absolutely how to manage that. My last question, again, one of my favorites, is what is your advice to startups, entrepreneurs, the smaller companies or the giants to actually fight through or help overcome this situation? And I'm going to take this personally.
Sure thing. So the way I see it, if there's one big constraint that startups have, it's lack of funding and lack of money, right? So which means that resources are extremely scarce, which also means that you need to make sure that where you invest those resources have to be that much meatier and that much more critical. So a startup normally likes to do a lot of stuff. And I guess now it is even more critical that you got to shortlist what is that 1 or 2 things that you need to do for pure survival mode, because your resource funding is scarce. So if I keep that, then assume that I can only do 1, 2, or 3 things. That's all I can do. I can't do more in this time frame because people won't give money. Then anything that increases customer engagement is what you need to focus on. And this might be not just as a advice that borders on making a person a little fearful of where to invest. But if I flip it, it's actually a fantastic time for a startup to get engaged with the customer, because a large organization will take that much time to move. And I believe that a startup is, because of the sheer size, can do it much faster than what a large organization does. So to that extent, if you've got limited resources, how do I increase customer engagement and make sure attract, I don't say force a customer, but attract a customer to come to you. And then once he comes to you, he or she, the experience that they get will keep them with you. So if I'm from a startup perspective, that's the one thing that I would like to focus on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie, for giving us your time today. We do look forward to our next interactions with you.